So I got an 87 Toyota Camry here that I need to replace the timing belt on. So I'll show you the process of doing that. First of all, we gotta lift it up and pop the hood. On the Camry, the timing belt is on the passenger side of the car, behind this plastic cover here. So you gotta take all this stuff off of this side of the engine to get to it, including the alternator. And also, in order to see the timing marks, you have to take the valve cover off. So it's kind of an involved process, but hopefully we can get it done quickly. So for this car, you'll need to hold the engine up, so I'll just leave the jack under there, positioned under the oil pan, so I can support the engine, because we have to take off the front motor mount. Next, I'll remove the wheel. On this car, it takes a 21mm socket to undo the lug nuts. Next, we want to take off the dust cover from this side of the engine. It takes two 10mm bolts. So now we can get to the pulley whenever we need to take that off. Next, we'll start working on the upper side of the engine. So the next thing to do would be to take off the stuff over here. So pull the little cover off the throttle cables. It kind of snaps on there. And now there's three 10mm bolts that hold, there's three 8mm bolts that hold the bracket on. I guess these could have been replaced, so they might be 10mm. So there's three electrical connectors on here that need to undo. A blue one and two white ones. So the third white one's down here. So once that's done, then you can pull it out of the way. Now to get the cover off here, we need to move the power steering reservoir. This kind of makes a mess because there's a hose down here that needs to pop off, so we'll undo that. This ground wire comes off with the power steering bolts. These are two 10mm bolts. So this will come off whenever if I pull the bracket off over here. So if you can see right back in there is the hose that needs to come off, so I need to get some pliers, take off the clamp. Now I got the clamp out of the way so I can pull the hose off, but you'll want to make sure you have a drain pan under there to catch some of the oil, because this likes to drip, and it'll probably drip the whole time I have this apart. And this is kind of hard to get off because the tube moves around and isn't fixed solidly. There. Didn't drip too much out of the hose, but some it got on the pulley, on the belt, so I'll need to make sure I clean that off. Okay, so the next step will be to remove the alternator. So for the alternator, there's a securing bolt back here and the tensioner bolts over here. These are 12 millimeter and this is 14. So first I'll loosen the securing bolt on the front of the alternator and make sure that's a little loose. With the 14 millimeter, I'll loosen the back bolt. So this one I'll loosen the pulley so I can get the belt off. So once that's loose enough, maybe not. Once that's loose enough, the belt just pops off. It's easiest to get it to go out through the bottom. The cable up here on the top is held on by a 10 millimeter nut. You want to take that off. Probably best to have the battery disconnected for this. Or you'll do that. So I'll go disconnect the battery now. So for this you just use a 10 millimeter on the negative cable. Pull that out of the way. Now whenever I touch this on something, it doesn't do any awful sparking. Then you just pull the plugs off of the alternator. Take off the front bolt. And then take off the back bolt and the alternator will pull off of there. Now I can just lift the alternator out if I have. So next we want to deal with this bracket on the front here. Since this the cover has to come out forward, this bracket is in the way here, so we have to undo these three 14 millimeter bolts and this 14 millimeter here. Probably best to loosen this one here also so that the little arm can adjust to fit on there properly. Let me put these on here really good. So now the bracket pulls off of there. Just set it aside. So now this wiring harness will need to pull out of the way to get the valve cover off. So there's three connectors down here. One is under this boot. It's got a clip that pulls off. And then the other two are just this blue and yellowish connector here. So now this will come out of the way once we take out these two bolts. So for the front cover, to get that off, we need to take the motor mount out of the way. So this is a 17 millimeter and it's got two 14 millimeters that are accessed from underneath. So this is it's a little hard. You have to get a long socket to get up under there. So I'll do that now. So that's loose, but it still is sitting on the bolt, so I gotta jack the engine up a little bit to take the pressure off the bolt. And then the bolt will just pull out of there. Now to get those two 14 millimeter bolts you can see underneath there, you have to do that from underneath the engine. So for this I use a long socket, a deep well socket with a long extension on it, So I can reach up from underneath here and undo those bolts. Once the bolts are out of there, this should be able to just pull out. Over there on the table. Now I can get to the 4 10mm bolts that hold the front dust cover on. The back one's a little difficult, so you have to use a short 10mm socket for that one. Remember where they go, because some of the bolts are long and some are short. Got the 4 bolts out. Okay. So now this dust cover pulls out of here. So I like to put the bolts in it so that I can keep track of them. So the next step is to go down below and take off the front pulley and then take off this lower cover. So I'll do that now. On the lower pulley is the alternator and AC belt. And also the power steering belt goes to the back, but it's really hard to get to the power steering. So I found that it works okay to just take the pulley off and then take the pulley belt out. And then when you pull the pulley off, this other little belt here comes out too, and then it just goes back on the same way, so kind of lucky that way. It's easiest to take this bolt off with an impact wrench, because then you don't have to hold the pulley in position. To get the pulley off, you might need some type of puller. I found that I had this old nasty slide handle with a hook on the end, and that worked to just pop it off this way. So there's the belt that's on the back side of it. So I'll just leave that belt there for now. Now there's a couple 10mm bolts you get down from here and a couple you get from the top, so I'll work on those now. If you lower the engine down a little bit, it gives you a little more room to get to some of these mid bolts. There's one right up in the center of the cover. You have to have a short socket to get to. I'm using a 1/4 inch drive to do this because their sockets are smaller. So it looks like there's 4 bolts that you get to from down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one up here is done from the top on the upper dust cover. So there's these 4 here that you do from underneath. So now you can see the crankshaft pulley, and there's a little tiny, let me get a pointer. So on the crankshaft there's a little tiny nub right there that you have to align a notch in this back washer with. Let me see if I can get that around here. You also have to go around to the right position to get the crankshaft in the right place. So as you can see, that little nub is, or the little indent, the little tiny indent in the washer is lined up with that back nub. So now I'll go up and make sure that the camshaft is in the right position. So the next step is to take the valve cover off. To do that, we need to take all this take all the spark plugs out, or wires out, not the spark plugs actually. We just put them to the side over there, and then this bracket is in the way of the valve cover coming out, so we got to undo those two 10mm bolts right there. Oh, try not to lose those when you drop them. Luckily that one went all the way down to the ground. So then the next thing to do is take off these 4 nuts on the top that hold the valve cover on. These are 30mm. Luckily I just bought a 30mm for another project, so I had one. So these don't have to be undone in a certain order, I just missed one here. So this wire harness can come out of the way here. And there's a little breather valve over here. There's little seals that are in there that probably need to come out in order to allow the valve cover to come off of there. So they're just stuck in there from the pressure from the nut. So once those are off, it just comes out freely. So let's see if I can get the camera to see the alignment on the camshaft. So back here there's a nub on the housing, and there's a little groove in the camshaft, and those need to line up in order to be in the right position. As if I understand correctly, there's no other indicator on it that I can find. Let's see if I can get a better shot of that. Hopefully you can kind of see that back there. Let's see if I can get some more light down there. So I just happened to get it lined up, positioned correctly whenever I twisted the crankshaft around, so I got that little groove right there to line up pretty well with the camshaft alignment pin. Over on the other side, there's no indicator on the crankshaft pulley itself. So on the pulley, on the belt, there's a tensioner pulley here that has that's spring loaded. So you loosen this and then you can pull the spring off and let the tension off the pulley. Whenever my belt went bad previously, what happened was some of the teeth pulled off around the crankshaft, so then the crankshaft was able to spin without turning the belt. Luckily on the Camry it's what's called a free spinner, which means that the pistons can go up and down with the valves open and not hit. So some cars destroy the valves when the timing belt goes out, but luckily the Camry doesn't. Next step is to loosen that little pulley there with a 12mm, well it's a 14. 14mm socket. Loosen that pulley, and then you can use some pliers to get the little spring off. Oh, dropping stuff. So now this pulley is loose and can loosen the belt. Now I can try and get this adjusted a little better. I'll try and pull the belt off the top without taking it off the bottom. See if I can get this to stay somewhere. Oh, it came off the bottom anyways. Oh well. So what I'm going to try and do is get the camshaft in a little bit better position. It looks like. So my goal is to get this turned a little bit better aligned. And then put the belt back on and get the tension all, or the looseness all to go to the back side so that the pulley takes it out instead of being loose on the front. Let's see if I can get a better shot of the pulleys down here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pulleys. It goes underneath the two lower pulleys, the crank pulley and the idler pulley over here. Oh wait, this is the oil pump pulley. So it goes underneath the lower pulleys, behind that pulley, and then around the outside of the water pump pulley. And around the upper idler pulley. Oh. So I think I have it aligned better this time, so the tensioner pulley is taking out most of the slack, and it appears to be still aligned on the crankshaft and the camshaft. So I'll tighten the tensioner pulley back up and put it back together. Hope for the best. What it does whenever it's out of alignment is just have really low power, so you can barely start out.